Tehran's responded to the sanctions with threats to block oil trade through the crucial Strait of Hormuz, leading to a continued deadlock in the Persian Gulf. American warships are also present in the region with a mission to prevent any hindrances of passage. Let's talk to John Rees, a political activist and national officer at the Stop the War Coalition, who's in London, to get his thoughts about what we're seeing unfolding in front of our eyes here. Hi there. Sanctions are often used by the West, but how effective are they really? They're often criticised, I know. Well, what do you think the US and the EU is really trying to achieve here?
Well, I think we have to understand this as a strategic foreign policy problem that the United States has had since the failure of the war in Iraq. The war in Iraq was meant to give them a stable, pro-Western, pro-business base for operations in the Middle East. What it ended up doing is making Iran a greater regional power than it was before. And so they've got to deal with this problem, and this is what the sanctions are about. But the sanctions, as we know in the past, as we know over the case of Iraq indeed, were the precursor to war. They were a way of preparing public opinion for military conflict. And therefore they are doubly dangerous in this case. They're economically dangerous in the short term, but as your news report has pointed out, we're looking at now a conflict in the Gulf of Hormuz, which is one of the main arteries of the world economy. It really couldn't get more serious than this.
And of course, the other big outcome of this that's not been missed either, we've heard from experts saying that China would be very glad to buy Iran's oil shipments if the EU refuses to. So I guess by pushing for sanctions like this, isn't the US providing an extra energy source for the very global power that's seen as Washington's economic nemesis?
Well, this is going to be the difficulty with any military conflicts in this region in years to come. You see, you can look on the Iraq war, you can look on the Afghanistan war as wars conducted by a superpower against very small countries. But the growing differentiation in the world economy, the growing military might of China, the recovery of Russia itself, is going to lead to a situation where this is not simply a conflict involving smaller powers in which the big powers want to get their way, but is going to break up any kind of international community, as it's sometimes called, and in which the major powers will be dragged into the conflicts as well. And that's a qualitatively more serious situation than the ones that we've had even in the past 10 years, and those were serious enough.
And of course, the possible economic implications as well. Is it wise, I wonder, to attempt to isolate such a major oil producer during these turbulent economic times that the world's seeing right now?
Well, you would think that some element of caution might kick in here, that just as we're on the brink of discovering that we haven't reached the pit of this recession, that there's liable to be, as I think nearly every economic commentator says at the beginning of the year, a very profoundly difficult year for the Eurozone, in which we may see the breakup of the euro, in which we're certainly going to see further austerity measures pushed through by the governments in Europe and in other places. You would think that this wasn't exactly the moment to risk further instability in the world economy.
So why no progress on restarting talks about Iran's nuclear program? And this despite the fact that Tehran has made unprecedented concessions. Russia's been suggesting this comprehensive step-by-step resolution. What is the stumbling block still at the heart of this stalemate then, do you think?
Well, I think the stumbling block is the point I made at the beginning of this interview. You see, this isn't just about nuclear weapons. If it were about nuclear weapons in the Middle East, then the United States would have a bone to pick with Israel, which is the only power in the Middle East which actually possesses nuclear weapons. It's not about that. That's the casus belli. But the reason for this continued conflict is because the American administration simply can't live with an Iran which has as much regional power as it has at the moment. You see, the Americans, when they look at the Iranian regime, they see its links with Syria, they see its links with Hamas, they see its links with Hezbollah, and this is a challenge to American power in an absolutely critical, economically critical, geopolitically critical area of the globe, and it's that which is the sticking point for the American administration, in my view.
Just briefly, how bad could this get? We're hearing now the UK supported Washington's rhetoric, saying its warships are at the ready to prevent any attempt by Iran to hinder trade through that crucial Strait of Hormuz. Could this go further, do you think, develop into actual warfare?
Well, I think this is certainly in the minds of some of the players in the international community. We know that Israel, for instance, has had test flights out into the Mediterranean for exactly the same distance as there is between Tel Aviv and Tehran, with a view to having a strike on the nuclear facilities. And we know that even the Bush administration in its last months had to restrain the state of Israel from doing this. So we know that there are some people, hawks in Israel, hawks in the United States, who want want to settle this militarily. And it does seem to me that once we begin on the process of implementing sanctions, of Iran responding to the sanctions, that there will be calls further down the road for a direct military conflict. And that, in this case, is even more dangerous than it was in the case of Iraq.
John Rees, political activist, national officer at the Stop the War Coalition, thanks for being on the line from London for us.